Hi, this is Gardner and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.
Along the potentially circuitous route from amateur to semi-pro to professional player, there are many perks that a top competitor in esports can get, which could easily be mistaken for goals along the way. He can get fame, he can become an international celebrity, he can be someone who everyone pays attention to, people are following, people are fans of. They can be someone who gains money, material gain, objects, sponsorships, more salary, better houses to live in, better toys to play with, etc. You could gain more recognition, more respect. Your peers respect you. People tell you you're one of the best. People say that by accomplishing this specific goal, you've done something historic. They blow up your ego. They tell you how wonderful the things you've done are. Maybe the people you respect finally show you sort of like, oh, I consider you on a similar level to me, or people you grew up looking up to are impressed with what you've done. They admire your accomplishments. You get a good feeling from that. Typically, that obviously comes from winning. But individually, if you're a player in a team game, you can get it for being one of the best in your role, one of the best generally as a competitor. So what should we pursue as a competitor? What is of these options, of the choices out there that's worthwhile to actually go after, to make the target, to make something that you always have in mind, you keep in the third eye, as it were. I don't know why I say third eye, the imagination there. I guess it's a more simpler way to put it, right? Because the problem is, if you look at some of those things I just listed off, well, if you pursue fame, well, we already know in the world of esports, with streaming existing, with social media being massive, and things that organizations take into account when they sign people and when they keep people on teams relative to how good their individual play actually is in the game. Obviously, interviews, wider media obligations. How good are you on camera? How charismatic do people like to listen to you? Are people compelled? Can you do an interview when you lose at a tournament and get more press attention and more positive sort of influence over the community than someone who comes top 5 at the tournament, was very quiet? If you pursue fame, then it's very easy to get sidetracked. I mean, you don't necessarily have to be the best player or even the most successful player or a player even that wins things necessarily. Some people just very charismatic individuals. You'd love to listen and talk. If you pursue money, okay, well, you might think, well, prize money, the biggest prize money's at the top of the tournaments. And obviously, in theory, if you're the best teams, you're going to get the best sponsorships, being the best organizations. Yeah, sure, there's sort of like a loose or a semi-direct correlation between the money you're going to make and how successful you are. But there are clearly going to be decisions you can take along the way, directions you could choose to go in, which don't align with being the best player you can be, or being someone who develops their potential to the maximum, or pushes themselves to achieve absolute heights of greatness they can. Because what if they win every tournament? What if it means they join another team and they're a lesser player on that team when they could have been a star player for another team contending? Instead, they go to be a sidekick, as it were, and just win all the tournaments that way. Did they develop themselves entirely? Did they have to push themselves to the extent they would have? Maybe not, right? If you choose to go the recognition and respect route, that might seem like, one that people might like. Hey, I want to be respected. I want my peers to know that I was a good player. I want people who I grew up working under, my coaches, my parents, etc., to respect me for what I've done. Yeah, there's something admirable about that. Yeah, I can realize why that's nice, but the problem with that is then you're going to be limited potentially by other people's imagination, by their expectations of you, by what they consider markers for success. Oh, it's okay, son, you did well for someone who comes from a smaller country where we don't have the same infrastructure, etc. Oh, I respect you as a really good player, even though I just beat you in this semi-final. You've never won a big tournament over me. Oh, well, you used to be a bad team. You didn't accomplish much at all. Now you're placing in the tops. Hey, be happy with that. That's good, right? You guys this is it. You guys are good now. You can see how if that's the goal, well, once you reach the goal, a lot of people stop, right? It's the goal. I've succeeded. I'm at the top of the mountain, right? That's why this analogy, these goals, these markers don't really work. Because consider this scenario. Consider this. Cloud9 won the Boston E-League, the E-League Boston Major, okay? The major that was at the beginning of 2018. Now, that was a lineup that had not won with that particular 5-man LAN any big international LANs, so they didn't have like a proven track record of being champions. They had lost to the elite teams that they'd faced in the previous LANs in the run-up to that. This actual victory was considered an overperformance. Thus, it actually was about as much as you possibly could have expected. Most people would not even have expected that. Like, a lot of people, even fans of theirs, weren't calling them to win that major. So, if anything, they went above and beyond. What an incredible accomplishment, right? If you were to then tell Cloud9, well, yeah, you won the biggest tournament that it's possible to win in Counter-Strike, but you know what? That's not enough. Now you got to go. That has to just be one step along the way. You have to go and win more majors. In fact, you know what? You have to try and go and break Fnatic's record. So 3 majors as an org, 2 majors as a 5-man lineup, obviously shared also by the guys from SK Gaming / Luminosity from 2016. You have to try and go and break that record. Like that's the only way that you'll actually truly achieve success. I mean, that would be kind of cruel and unusual, right? Cruel and unreasonable, maybe, would be a better way to describe it. Like, it's already enough that they accomplished that. That's actually an incredible performance, right? So winning can't just be the goal, because in their case, they won. And if anything, they went beyond even what was a reasonable goal for them to have. Whereas contrast it with the team that won the major afterwards. So the next major in CSGO was the Face It major in London, right? Face It London major. I'll have to get the name and scheme right on that if I'm going to keep saying the names of the majors. Astralis won this, right? So the Astralis lineup had already won most of the tournaments that they had played into that point in time. They were the world #1 ranked team. They were the dominant team in Counter-Strike. They had beaten every single other top opponent over the year. They were expected to win. It was even considered necessary for them to win, to put like the official seal of winning a major along with all their other incredible dominance and very strong considerations for an era. It was, quite frankly, the scenario that when this team won the major, that wasn't the goal reached. Like they should have been gunning beyond that. They should be a team going for the most majors ever won in history, for the most dominant era ever accomplished. For them, seemingly impossible goals nobody has accomplished so far, massively improbable expectations should be the case for them, right? But they've accomplished the exact same overall individual goal in terms of winning one tournament in your career. If you were to ask someone what's the best tournament you can win in Counter-Strike, it would be a major. Cloud9 lineup did that. Astralis lineup did that. But can you see how successful that accomplishment is? Actually depends on who those people are, and also how we, the people observing and judging and modelling and profiling these teams and considering and trying to weigh up who's better and who's not, our expectations influence them as well. We have an effect on them and how they see themselves and they think of themselves. So actually winning the exact same thing, the ultimate goal in Counter-Strike, can be different for 2 different lineups. So for me, the problem here and the gist of this video is that winning and the system of accomplishment that we have created, that we've modeled, ends up making slaves of us all. Like, winning doesn't even necessarily mean you played really well or well enough compared to your potential. You can win a game without even necessarily playing better than the other guy, because we had to pick arbitrary scoring rules, and there will always be little loopholes in the arbitrary scoring rules, and someone can play a little bit worse actually and sometimes win, or they can play an aspect where it looks comparable and they end up winning. Like, there's a lot of aspects to how a game works. In League of Legends, someone gets lucky in the early game. In CSGO, someone wins the right rounds and the money system plays against the opponent and makes it harder for the opponent to win. There are many different ways that this can happen. Instead, I mean, what you're basically talking about there is a concept of absolute success versus subjective success. So what would the absolute success be in this sense, right? Well, that's kind of the gist of the video. If instead of pursuing money or fame or recognition or some tangible mark like I won this tournament, yeah, those could be goals along the way, but the ultimate driving force, the thing that you keep in mind, the vision, the thought, the mantra, is to pursue greatness. Not glory, greatness. Now, glory will probably come along with greatness. I'd say it's something of a byproduct, more or less. If you pursue greatness in this manner, you're going to gain recognition and respect. You're very likely going to gain money due to what an excellent player you'll become. Odds are you're going to be someone who gets quite famous, not only for your play and what you're able to accomplish there, if it's truly great, and defying expectations, not being limited by people's imagination of what's possible, but also by the fact that if you explain to people that this is what you're pursuing, this in itself actually can have a marketing effect, can influence people. People will admire you. People will look at you and go, God, I wish I could have that mentality. I mean, there was a great story I remember from years and years ago where Kobe Bryant used to have a blog on his website when it first launched. Off the top of my head, I'd say it launched in like 2007 or 2008 or something. And at the time, he had like a player on his team who was a bench player called Ronnie Turiaf. I think he was a small forward or a power forward. And not particularly that good a player, but an all right player relative to his role. And he was a friend of Kobe's because Kobe didn't have a lot of friends on the team. And there was a story where Kobe said he'd gone out to the cinema and they'd seen, I think it was a cinema, or maybe they watched it at home. They watched a screening of that movie, which was like as far as I know, it's like a direct, like straight to TV movie, but it's a classic. It's from 1993. It's called Rudy. And it's a fucking really, it's either 93 or 95. It's a very, very good movie. If you like movies where people persist and they just keep going and nothing can stop them, doesn't matter what happens to them, doesn't matter what iniquities they face, doesn't matter people tell them quit, you'll never make it, doesn't matter that life's just fucking them in the face 24/7. One of those people that just never will stop. And as a result, it's such an inspiring movie if you can get into it. If you can get past the suspension of disbelief, it's not that sick a movie generally. It's got a few hammy performances, but it's also got some real genuine, sincere acting in it. And the thing is, Kobe Bryant himself is a legendary competitor for like working hard, trying to be the best player he can be, like going for like greatness on the historical level. So you would think someone like him would just watch that movie and go, well, that's what I'm doing anyway. No, what his actual takeaway from that movie was, he said on this blog that when he was watching that movie, he was saying to Ronnie Turioff, like, imagine if we competed the way that guy did. Because the whole premise of the movie is the guy who competes is trying to be an American football player at the college level, but like he doesn't have the skill set to do that. He doesn't have any of the physical gifts he should have. And really, he has no business being a player like that. Like the expectation should be nowhere near that for him. So the notion Kobe Bryant even had was like, imagine if I really just fought for everything like that. Someone with my skill set, someone who's developed my game as much as I have and already is considered a great player. But imagine if I went that extra mile in that particular sense. It's telling, right? Because in this scenario, we're talking about excellence weighted against your own talent, against your own potential. And crucially, who determines such things? Who gets to tell you how talented you are, how much potential you have? Now, you might think, well, this seems hypocritical. Don't you do that all the time on this channel? Oh, no, I do it. I give my own perception of what people's greatness are. But the person who's listening doesn't have to take it on board. In fact, I would go ahead and tell them, you can take it into account as someone's opinion. You can say, well, if I respect this person's opinion, then the opinion has some value here, or listen to see if they make any points. But I would absolutely suggest any competitor out there, have your own internal system of validation, your own metrics of what you think are good. Look for where you think you've done well, and then look for the gap of what you could have done better, where you could have pushed to another level, where even if you win the tournament, even if you're the best in the world, the best team, the best player, even if people tell you you've accomplished things no one else could ever do, you've topped all the ranks, look for where it's still possible to eke out, to edge out, to grind out some more greatness, to go to a level even above and beyond that. I mean, if someone comes in 10 years and breaks all your records and wins more championships, and you go, oh, well, if I'd have known that was possible, or if I'd have known someone would ever come along and challenge me, I would have really tried a bit harder, and I would develop my game. Well, it's no good saying all that now. You can do that right in this moment. Like, there's no reason to wait. Like, why not just get everything out of your game now? Because if you think about it, there are so many examples in the current sports world that I think will eventually bleed over, and I already see some of it, into esports. And quite frankly, this aspect of trying to be truly great on an individual and a team basis is going to be something which gets eroded by those factors that come along, the fame, the money, the recognition. And I can tell you why. Like, one thing I despise about the current climate in the NBA, for example, is it's quite a famous thing ever since free agency, where because market value is therefore going to determine how much a player can get paid, there will basically always be more market value for a player who has just won the championship with a team in the NBA, who's now coming up to free agency, to go elsewhere in the NBA, usually to a worse team, because that worse team wants a player who's proven, who's just become a champion, who seems he's in the spotlight, he's playing well, and as a result, they will overpay. They will pay more than his appropriate value within the NBA, or what his current team can pay, because now that his value as a player has gone up within their cap overall, they're going to spend most of their money retaining their top talent, and they're going to have to let this guy go. So here's a guy who individually probably can't be an all-time great player or champion elsewhere, but he's going to go elsewhere, giving up his chance to be the best he can be within his role and win championships in order to get paid more. And he'll just take his one championship, his two championships, and he'll go off, he'll parlay that, cash it in. Now, I don't blame him on an everyday basis of just being a person trying to provide for himself, trying to provide for his family, trying to make the most money he can in his career, cynically looking forwards and seeing that his career is not going to last that long. No one can predict which teams are going to win and lose necessarily, and trying to get in the short term the best deal for himself. Maybe he was a very good player before, didn't used to get paid much. There's all these great justifications. The problem is, individually taking aside these more tangible concerns and looking at the concept of trying to be a great player, for him, wouldn't it have been better to pursue greatness in terms of trying to win more championships? To be like, I was a core role player that won many, many championships. Now, funnily enough, you can have a different example, which might sound like I'm taking a similar scenario and inverting the logic, but there's a crucial distinction, which is when you're a player, and this is the reason why people dislike, for example, Kevin Durant is a very obvious example. LeBron James, when he went and played with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. When you're a player who is so good individually that you could be the main star of a team, and you might even be able to win the championship already on the current team you're on, the Thunder or the Cavs. These are teams that were some of the top teams in the NBA. They were making it deep in the playoffs. If you then go and team up with other superstars, and in the case of LeBron and Kevin Durant, admittedly, this isn't what ended up happening to him. What makes their example different is they teamed up with the other stars, but then they became the alpha male of that group. And if anything, yes, their accomplishments aren't quite as impressive as if they'd done it with lesser players on their old teams, but they've sort of actually cocked the guy who was the original star into being the guy who ends up with less credit. But obviously, if they had ended up being a sidekick to that player, they wouldn't have ended up with the same credit that they would have, even winning just one championship elsewhere that they might not be able to get even for winning 2 or 3 with more talent. So the idea of hopping onto a team, and obviously the worst examples of this is the likes of the Ray Allens of the world, where at one point in time, they were very good NBA players, like top 10 NBA player, but they weren't going to win the championship, but they get to win championships by going and hopping on bandwagons, like when he joined the Heat towards the end. Now, is he really a champion in that sense? He's a champion as a role player. For what Ray Allen was, he's not a champion though. So there's an aspect that I think is another way that you can go with the angle of, if you just tell people that the tangible aspect of, like, we call the person who wins this tournament a winner and a champion. So if you want to be a winner and a champion, do whatever it takes to win that. Well, it doesn't really feel like you're a champion in the same sense, right? It's the reason why the way I often describe it to my friends is I call when you do it the hard way, like on your own or in more difficult circumstances, or you have just enough help, but you have to do a lot yourself as the star player and you battle through. If you even win once or twice, then in my opinion, those championships come at a premium. I call it doing it the way of the samurai. So we're talking about Kobe's last couple of championships, not the ones with Shaq. We're talking about Dirk's 2011 run with the Mavs when he had fucking the corpse of Jason Kidd backing him up. We're talking about Simple's victories at Star Series Season 5 and the ESL1 Cologne last year. Those motherfuckers were done the way of the samurai. That wasn't like an Astralis that has a bevy of talents all over. That's not like FaZe Clan that's got all these amazing Hall of Fame level players across the board. That's not even like Mouse Sport. So they've got a very nice mixture of people, who are misfits, but collectively they make up a really strong squad, and it is hard to apportion who gets the credit because they're all doing different things into a high level. No, this guy did it with very little help, and he did it where a lot of the burden was on him. So for me, his championships count more than some other players who won many more championships that year. You look at some of the players throughout history, and funny, when I mention these players, these are some of the greatest players of all time. These are people who've accomplished as much as almost anyone in history, the most championships, some of the greatest players of all time. So many years, ranked number 1, year and year of dominance. So you're going to think, well, surely they actually got all those things, Thorin, the fame, the money, the recognition. Yeah, but I know from reading interviews, from even knowing some of these guys personally, that their mentality, that's the whole point. These things came along the way. And in fact, the only reason they got the sheer frequency of great tangible results and money and recognition, all these things, is because they had this one track focused obsession with being the greatest player they could be. And the 3 examples I'll give you would be CS, I'm going to give Get Right. And I'm not going to give Get Right in CSGO, where in the beginning he was the best player ever, nobody could touch him, he would get the most frags, he'd win the most clutches, he'd ensure you won the game, he was unstoppable in big matches, he was great in finals, he's an MVP caliber player. That all sounds great, but Get Right was already one of the best players in the world at the end of 1.6. And I remember some tournaments in 2010 and 2011 when I would talk to this guy and he would lose a final where he'd played amazing. And he'd be saying, I shouldn't have made this mistake, and I dropped the bomb on that round, and I could have won that 1v1. And I would try and tell him, this is like a friendly setting. Like, come on, man. Like, you were fucking sick in this game. Like, your teammates could have done a lot more as well. Or you know what? If you play them again, I think you'd probably beat them next time if you play the way you did there. But the point is, his mentality to drive himself, to always be looking for the things that could be improved, for the things that could be better next time, for the ways where even what he'd done that was good had a level it could go to a higher level. Even if he'd have won that tournament, this is the key thing. I later found found out that Get Right was like that even when he won the tournaments. Even when he won competitions, he sometimes saw mistakes. And he realized, I'm going to have to fix that next time. Or if I want to win again, I'm going to have to see if that's in line, because maybe that won't work out for me. Maybe I won't get lucky this time, or maybe I'll get unlucky as a result of this being in my game. And that's why already being amazing, winning majors, being a champion in Counter-Strike 1.6, that mentality is what then meant in CSGO he could go to levels we never even imagined possible. So Get Right in the early days of CSGO literally looked like he had hit a level nobody would ever reach ever again in the game. I would argue only 2 people ever did. I would say Kenny S, end of 2014, early 2015, Simple now. 2 people ever, and this is like half a decade or more over the game's history to get 2 more people that were anywhere close to that. If this guy's resting on his laurels, on the fame, the money, the recognition, he wouldn't need any of that. Then you go and you look at, in StarCraft Brood War, obviously pick the player Flash. Because during the year when Flash was making every single final, nobody else has ever done that in history, by the way. He's making every final, and he won most of them. He won 4 out of the 6. He was a guy who was still looking at those losses. He was a guy who, even when he was winning the tournament, was seeing, there's still some holes in my build orders here. I'll have to work extra. That's why he used to literally make his goal so that once he actually once said he felt like he'd accomplished enlightenment. Because he was going for a goal of practice and dedication and trying to get to a level of excellence that was beyond just things like, I won this tournament. And if you win this tournament, people say you are the best. And if you are the best, that means you are the number 1. You can't get better than that. Well, yeah, you can't get a better player at the moment. Or you can't get a more decorated player at the moment. But could this particular player be better? Flash is someone who understood that. And that's why he didn't just become a champion or a multiple-time champion. This is the guy. There was a reason why at the end of the game, even Jadon called him God. And not even necessarily just in a joking manner. The guy had transcended the fucking game itself. The last one I'd pick is the one I know the least about, because I'm not an aficionado of fighting games. But I mainly got introduced to this guy. Obviously knew about him in esports history anyway, because he's a champion. It's obviously the legendary Daigo Umara from Japan, the famous Street Fighter player, particularly associated with the character Ryu, obviously. I know him mainly because I found out a little bit about him, and then every time I would read Stuchu's work where he'd reference him, or I'd ask Stuchu stuff, or I'd see videos, the guy's legend is almost built on this premise of pursuing greatness. This is a guy who wasn't about just winning the competition. In fact, he even used to have some... I'll put an article in the description box, which just shows what an amazing philosophy he had. He even had the philosophy that you don't even try and beat an opponent where he's weak, which is what every competitor who just wants to win and says, I'm addicted to competition. It's not about the game, it's about winning for me. Those guys want to win even the easy way. Who gives a fuck? You win. Winners are winners. I've won the tournament. I won the most tournaments. That's all that matters. This guy's philosophy actually was, wherever your strength is, I want to beat you there, because when I beat you there, I've shown you I'm better than you. Like, it's inarguable then. You can't fuck with me. I took your strength. I used it against you, and I beat you with that strength. Now, you can't say, but, I had a bad day in this sense, or are you playing cheap in that way? If it's a team game, I just went after the bad player. But this is the extreme version of this philosophy, but how can you not respect it? It's incredible, right? And so when that person then becomes godlike, it takes it to a whole new level. This video was kindly supported by Dean Tanglis, Andreas Snazore Westerlund, Gardner Wilson, OllieJ, Tobias Bernasconi, NateDOhDoubleG, James Harding, Kyla Harris, Travis Greb, Daniel Yordanov, Tristan Jones, and a special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for upcoming content of mine? Perhaps you'd like to ask me a question for my monthly video AMA. Do you want some teasers to see who the next guests are for my talk shows, for my interviews? Maybe you'd like to take part in a monthly esports discussion with yours truly. Well, put your money where your mouth is at the Patreon link in the description box below and join the Scrilluminati today.